Good day to all you safety champions out there, and welcome on board of another episode of the Avy Assist Focus Sessions. It's easy to forget that thousands of professionals in Africa, you and my guests here at the table, work hard every day at making commercial aviation the safest form of transport, also in Africa. And you don't do that because you expect special recognition. You think safety and act in ways that promote safety because you know the aviation industry and your country depend on that, and because it is the right thing to do. As always, we salute you for your dedication. We are here to support you in your role as safety champion. You are part of our family. With the focus sessions, Avy Assist brings you affordable and certified continuous professional development to help raise the bar on safety in Africa. We inform, inspire and entertain African aviation safety in our focus sessions. We'll also be answering some of the questions from our viewers. We'll try and get and deal with as many as we can. This episode is actually sponsored by aircraft manufacturer Airbus. Today we'll be talking about mental well-being beyond cockpit and cabin crew. I'm joined at the table by three guests from across the industry. Our first guest today benefits from her precision skills as a trained accountant. Her first job in aviation was a travel center account officer, and she then grew into various audit and compliance roles, and now heads up safety as the manager risk at Overland Airways in Nigeria. Welcome to the table, Aderonke.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here too.
And thanks for making the long journey all the way from Lagos.
Thank you.
My second guest has joined us all the way from Nairobi in Kenya. Captain Mukulu Kai was a long-time pilot with Kenya Airways, the manager of flight operations at one of Africa's leading civil aviation authorities, the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority, and currently is the Chief Operations Officer with Pineal Air in Nairobi. Mary, karibu sana.
Asante, thank you for having me. I'm happy.
And also in your case, thanks for making that very long journey all the way to Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And my third guest featured in a heartwarming one-on-one interview back in 2021 actually, I should say. He spoke about his career in air traffic control in Zimbabwe, South Africa and the Netherlands. Marvin Rangarira is on-the-job instructor and assessor, responsible for training, mentoring and evaluating new and existing controllers here at Dutch Air Traffic Control in the Netherlands. Welcome back to the table, Marvin.
Dank u wel, meneer.
Dank u wel, meneer. Great to have you. And actually, your interview is still available to watch whenever people want on our YouTube channel, on demand. Well, voices from West Africa, East Africa, and somewhere in the middle, basically, if you count the Netherlands as the middle.
Southern part?
The southern part, yes. Let's get started on mental well-being support for all in the aviation industry. And Marvin, maybe that can initially bring me to you, because when we speak about mental well-being in our industry so far, we've mostly spoken about cockpit crew and cabin crew. But carefully and gradually we hope to expand that to other domains. You're from another domain, the air traffic control. What have you seen change in terms of how we look after the mental well-being of air traffic controllers in your case?
Yeah, in one of the entities I've worked with in South Africa, I'd say in the southern part of Africa rather.
Yes.
There was, I was part of the CISM, call it Critical Incident Stress Management.
Okay.
And I was one of the debriefers there. So the system was such that there was an expert from outside that was called in. And then from every team, there was an informal leader that was chosen. Let's say for a location, maybe
in a particular airport.
Yeah, particular city, they would pick one person and then to represent that team. So that person would get trained in becoming somebody who would manage stress, of their colleagues. So what would happen? You would go for a training for maybe like a week, and then you get posted. But then you always get support from that expert. You had a direct line to the expert. So what would happen is, after a week, you have support for your staff in terms of well-being. After an incident, then debriefer is assigned to you, which is somebody who you work with from your team that you know and you're comfortable sharing information with. So in that way, it was a well-oiled machine, so to say, that would manage the stress. Because as a controller myself, when you are involved in an incident, you just want someone that you can talk to, you know, just say what happened without
offload what
fear
happened.
of being victimized or maybe, So that's how the system was run, basically. So it starts with an expert that comes and trains.
Trains the debriefers.
The debriefers, yes. And then maintains the system in that wherever there was a complicated issue, then you would refer to that expert, and then the expert would decide whether it needs further intervention or not.
And so you're saying that system is called CISM or CISM?
CISM. CISM, yeah.
CISM, okay.
Yeah.
But this was particularly when there was an incident that happened.
There was an incident.
It wasn't meant as a regular person you could talk to. It was only linked to an incident.
So this was specific to when you have an incident. But the same organization I worked for then applied the same concept. They wanted to change the organizational values. So they, again, called the champions, they call them the change agents.
Yeah.
So again, from every system, they choose an informal leader to come and get trained on the new mission statement that they were working on, the new values they were trying to implement. And then after getting that information, you'd go to the stations again, informally, just start talking with everybody around the stations. And they get an adoption of, they did a survey afterwards to gauge the knowledge about the new values. It was over 90%, which was quite a success.
This was people buying into the new values?
Into the new values, just by using change agents or change champions. So again, there's a professional that comes in, trains, and then you have representatives from every station that are well-trained and equipped. Then just start talking to their colleagues.
From there?
Yeah, from there. And then that's how the system works.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mary, if I can take it to you, privileged to be member of the cockpit crew very often. Have you been in touch? Have you had experience with mental well-being support in that role?
When I became a captain,
yes,
that's why I would say that to be able just to sit and give that mental support. And one incident that I can give is every 2 hours I used to like going out and stretching, myself. And I could see the flight purser was seated alone, and you could actually tell that she had an issue. And so we were able just to sit, just informally, just talking, laughing. And she was able to open up because she was going through family challenges. Okay. And all she wanted, she didn't want a solution. She just wanted someone to talk about. Yeah. Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that's something we always think. People want solutions necessarily, but it's sometimes also a matter of offloading, I think, isn't it? Talking about the issue. Aderonke, I mean, if I look at our industry, I think overall, the concept of broadening support for mental well-being beyond the cockpit and cabin crew is pretty new. Have you managed at Overland Airways to make some first careful steps in that direction to, for example, support the well-being of ground operations crew, etc.?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yes, we have done so. I think about 9 years ago, there was a particular accident in one low-cost airline. I recall I was in Toulouse Business School then, where a lot of school children were on that particular flight. And it was a suicide attempt, it was a suicide mission by the first officer that led to that particular air crash. I think that was when the law came about, when one of the crew is leaving the cockpit, somebody needs to go in there instead of having only one person. Yeah. Then there was quite a lot of emphasis on the fact that people are going through some mental issues that they are not discussing. And as Overland Airways, we took some steps to have some training. We invited an external party, the aviation medical examiners for airlines, where crew perform their medical. So we invited them in to have a discussion with our staff. And I think one of the lessons I took from there then was the fact that we have to be our brother's keeper. Yeah. We have to look out for your colleague. And when you notice things that are not normal, you need to speak up, and then so that the person we can get help and the awareness. Yeah. And I think it worked, because when you see people that normally will talk, will chit chat in the office, and you see them not being with them, they are withdrawn to themselves, then something is going on. And like Mary said, at times, people just need to have somebody to talk to, to assure them that whatever they are going through at that particular time, they were not the first, and they won't be the last. Because at times, it's easy to feel my issues are peculiar to me. But when you talk to people, you find out that it's a challenge that it has an expiry date. And if you talk to the right people, you could have solution. And talking out to people are more or less like the 50% solution has come in, because you have somebody you can open up to without being judged.
Yeah. And I think what we also really do, because Avy Assist, we have a peer support training course as well. And in there we also make very clear, and I think maybe that, Marvin, was something you also experienced in the training you had for CISM. I have to make sure I don't talk about CISM. That it's fantastic if an organization trains peer supporters, mentors, but it's also important that those people know when they have to refer somebody to somebody else, because in the end, the trained peer supporter is not a psychologist.
Yes.
Was that something that was also part of your training?
Yeah, that was part of our training. So the gist of the training was such that, imagine an onion, right?
Yes.
When something happens, you start talking to the person, what happened? And then, how did that make you feel? Again, you're going to the next layer
of the onion that you peel
so
back.
how did it affect you? You go to the other layer. So you're peeling off layers of what really happened. So by you unpacking what happened, like she said, and a problem solved is a problem half solved. In that aspect on its own, you are lessening the burden of the person trying to overthink about what happened. Just sharing and talking about it, it actually helps in part of solving the problem.
The issue.
Yeah, the issue rather.
Mary, any experience in your respect in terms of making sure that, yes, we have to train people to become mentors and peers, but also make sure that they know when to refer, so to say? Is that something in the airline you've worked with that was an issue, you think?
When I was in the airline at that time, it wasn't as elaborate as it is right now.
Yeah.
Because I've even seen on social media what, like, our national airline, Kenya Airways, is doing. They've actually come up with even trained psychologists who are already working for the company. And you can always go back and have a conversation with them. And then I remember that even others there was an incident that something happened with a conveyor belt, and something tragic happened, and the peer counselor actually went to talk to this person. They didn't wait for the person to come to their office to talk to them, yes.
Okay, and I think what impressed me also really when I was at Kenya Airways somewhere last year is I noticed they have a room which is for expectant mothers to go and sit and talk with others about. Have you been to that centre? I was there by chance, actually, but it's really impressive. I mean, trying to get attention for the special circumstances, special stresses perhaps that would-be mothers or people that are pregnant can go. I don't know what they call it, the Mother's Well Centre, or quite impressive to see those kind of initiatives. Because then we take it away from, first of all, like you said, Marvin, waiting for an incident to happen and then look at something with CISM, or make sure that things that are not perhaps initially related to the workplace, like being pregnant, but do have an impact on how we perform, makes it more easy to talk about these things, I think. Yeah. Now here's a question, an anonymous question from Africa, and I think particularly those of you who are in a managing position may relate to this. The question is, what suggestion would you have for managers in Africa who face lots of pressure themselves, burnout, performance expectations, but are also required to provide support to their staff? So you have your own worries, but you also have to support somebody else. I see you laughing. What comes to mind?
Okay, managers are human beings.
Yeah.
We must have that understanding, yes. And that we go through our own pressure too. But one of the things I tell my team back at home is, you know yourself. And I always tell people, there is no issue, there is no form of illness that is peculiar to you. Speak up and get help. When I, as a manager, have my own issues, I should be able to speak to my next line manager or somebody I can actually confide in and say, I'm going through this. And then the beauty of it is the fact that those challenges are temporary. And once you are able to talk to somebody that can get you out of it, they determine whether you need further help. but we've seen people over time go into such. Like, before I go further, I'll just mention that in Africa, we don't talk about mental health issues.
There's a stigma.
It's a stigma
Yeah.
because it's tied to madness or something, which the advocacy now is that there are two separate issues entirely.
Yeah.
Having a mental well-being issue, it's like it's an incident or an issue that is actually taking you through that stress level. And when that issue is dealt with, you get back to yourself and you're fine. So it's good that now we can come out and talk about it.
Still not easy, obviously.
Yes, it's still, but we are not where we used to be. And so that's why we should encourage ourselves to continue to talk more about it. And let's break it down in simple languages to people. Reasons why you have mental well-being issue. It could be economic pressure, it could be marital pressure, it could be work-related pressure, it could be the fact that you are not meeting an expected goal.
From within the company, for example.
Even outside, you could set goals for yourself as an individual. In this particular year, I intend to be this and that, and you're not meeting. Or maybe you see your colleagues flying higher than you, even your primary school mates or secondary school mates that you just bump into and everything. It gets people to go into some form of self audits and looking at themselves and people develop mental issues through that means. So it's important that we keep talking about it, that mental issues is no respecter of any rank or position. Managers can go through mental well-being issues too.
And I think it's also the point that I think Mary made earlier. To some extent, a silver lining of the corona crisis has been that we're more able and more open to talk about these things, which is a great development. It's time for our first letter for the prize draw. But before I give you that letter, let me quickly explain for those of you who are new how our prize draw works. In this draw, you have a chance to win $100 in each episode. And we do that for two reasons. The first and most important one, perhaps, is that the game will give you some insight into what inspires my guests here at the table. And the second one is simple. It gives you a chance to win $100. You'll see a web address at the bottom of the screen. At that page, you can submit the 3 letters that I'll give you throughout the broadcast, and that together form a 3-letter code. Every 10 minutes or so, we'll show you one of the favorite books of a guest here at the table. And all you have to do is to write down the first letter of the first name of the author. And you'll end up with a 3-letter code. You enter those 3 letters on the Google form page and then click Submit. But here's the important thing, you can only submit your 3-letter code until 15 minutes after the end of this focus session. From among the correct answers, we'll draw one lucky winner and send that person her or his $100 by mobile money. We'll announce the winner on our LinkedIn page, so that's an extra reason to follow us on LinkedIn. Now the first book, Clive Irwin, White Body, The Making of the Boeing 747. I think, Mary, you took this to the studio as a pilot?
Yes.
Briefly, what's this book mean to you?
The book is intriguing to me because during the time when the 747 was being made, it's one of those, it cannot happen.
Okay. Because it was too big, they thought?
It was too big then, yeah. So people are wondering, okay, will it even in terms of performance and everything, but they actually did it. It went in the air. 747 has flown for quite some time.
Yeah.
And it was something that, because of the 747, people looked at the negative side of it, not negative, the challenges about it, and they were able to come up with the other wide bodies and to make it more fuel efficient. And even if now they moved from the 4 engines to the 2 engines, it's courtesy of the 747 being
Having
made.
learned
Yes,
from...
having learned from the 747.
Excellent. Well, it'll go on our reading list. Thank you very much, which will come along with the broadcast on our channel. Now, next to the cash prize, there's another award that you can get from the focus sessions, because we also offer you a chance to qualify for a certificate of attendance, following requests from our viewers about getting those certificates. Now, to qualify for a certificate of attendance, you must watch 100% of each session and score 75% or higher on the end assessment that will become available on our website after this broadcast. But the assessment will only be available for 48 hours after the broadcast. Now that means you best watch the live broadcast so that you have enough time to complete the assessment on our website. enough about rewards. Let's get back to our discussions of mental well-being. I think we left off on this point of the silver lining of Corona, which has made all of us more open about mental well-being and to talk about it. You mentioned briefly, Aderonke, that some of the lessons we've learned are also about trying to change the stigma that's really on mental health. If I take that to you, Mary, would you have any suggestions how we can try and break down that stigma in Africa? What could we do to make people more open to talk about this topic?
I think in Africa, one of the things, I'm not sure if it's an African problem or a world problem, but people have realized that women tend to live longer than men. And that's because we talk.
Okay.
I'll give an example. You can go to the salon to make your hair. And by the time you're leaving, all of you have discussed your marital issues, the child that has been a nuisance to you, and what's going on in the office. And you'll all laugh about it. And by the time you're leaving the salon, you have the weight off your shoulders. And
in my case, not because I'll be in the salon very shortly, of course. So, I can see with your hairstyle.
Yeah. So I think the articulation then wasn't that we were taking care of our mental well-being. Now, vice versa, going back to men. When men meet together, they'll just talk about sports. It's hardly for them to talk about their personal issues and what they're going through. And I think that's one of the ways, if we are going to handle the mental well-being, is to find out ways of us just opening up, showing the vulnerability. As the panelists had said, there's nothing unique. There's nothing new that you're going to talk about, and everybody's going to look at you and wonder, what kind of a human being are you?
He must be the only person on the planet.
Yeah. It can, because there's nothing new under the sun. Yeah. So just find ways of just talking.
But particularly you say, and I think that's very interesting actually, men. Because actually I find that myself, in the village I live in the UK, more or less the default for men to meet up is over beer.
Yes.
Yeah. Whereas if you, that's, Marvin is laughing at it, but I think that's something I sometimes try to change in my local environment, because I don't always want to go for a beer. Sometimes you just want to have a chat about something else than sport. So maybe then creating a more informal setting, which is not linked to sport and beer, might help. Marvin, any suggestions from your side as to how we can break that? I mean, you're a man, as far as I know. What can we do?
So there's one ANSP, or rather the company that I worked for.
ANSP is a traffic control organization, basically?
A navigation services provider.
Thank you.
So they have a hotline, so to say, with experienced controllers at the end of the line.
Yes.
To just listen to the problems. So if you think you have issues that are, of course, related to work, there's always a number that you can call and you can get support. And also they have the capability of referring the issue if it's too big. Otherwise, for just talking, there's always a line available with someone to talk to at the other end.
And is that anonymously? Can people just call up without... Okay.
Completely anonymous, no reference to what is spoken about, and your name, nothing.
Nothing, okay. Yeah. That's an excellent idea and thing indeed, to open up and make it more accessible indeed. And nowadays, in Africa, everybody has a mobile phone, so in that respect there is no excuse. I guess the trick would be to have to be able to hide the number of people that are calling. That's a technicality. Aderonke, anything from your side that you would think of that we can do to reduce that stigma?
Yes, we have to keep raising the awareness and let people understand that it's not hereditary.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the challenges. People feel if I have a mental issue, definitely my children will have. So that's why people don't like to talk about it, because it can actually be used to describe you. Is it that person that had X, Y, Z, and is it the daughter of this person? So people tend to keep very quiet, don't talk about it. But the awareness of the fact that it's temporary, it doesn't define you, it doesn't define your family.
Maybe now it does, but over time it will not.
The people know, and that the fact that it's not hereditary, you're not going to pass it from one generation to the other. These are stress-induced issues that once those stress is taken out, that's why you see when people change environment at times, they transform, they blossom, because things that... for example, people will tell you where they live before, there is no power, there is no water, the transportation is difficult. If they transit into a location where they have power, they have everything, they can plan their life, they are much better off in terms of how they improve in their life. So some of these things are environmental induced issues that leads to mental breakdown. So once we raise those awareness and we keep talking about it. And another thing is that the confidentiality of when I'm able to talk to you, you must be able to give me the trust and your trust to tell me those issues are not going to be discussed in a lunch setting with another set of people, and people start looking at me with somebody that is stigmatized with something.
So we have to be very careful in sharing what comes out of those meetings. Marvin,
I like when you mentioned environment. There is one, again, service provider that I work for, where they're very cautious about the environment in which their employees work in. There are green spaces all over you when you walk around their buildings. There are green spaces where you can just sit, relax, and sort of like just deload without talking to anybody. The environment itself is actually, conducive for somebody to just
relax,
you know. And they also have quite sophisticated light, which simulates sunlight. You know, even when outside there, the weather is something else. It's cold, it's windy. But when you just sit under that light, it mimics, just a bright...
Like you're on a bright blue day, basically.
Blue day when you're sitting at the beach, maybe. When you sit under that light, just for a few minutes, you feel relief.
Okay.
And they also have several other programs where they get employees to get together and play sport and meet after work. It's an intentional program. They call it After Duty.
Yes.
To say after work, there is something to do. There's always something to do, whether you meet up for a cooking course. But it's for you to just go there and just deload and just be yourself and be a human being. So the environment, I think the employers and the powers that be can do something for the mental well-being of the
workers.
Yeah.
So whereas Aderonke was saying the environment can be a cause of the problems, you're saying you can partially also change that and make it a positive, positive thing in terms of the environment. And I think some of these things, yes, maybe sophisticated light will be expensive, but there are also things, I'm sure, solutions which are not that expensive to come across. And I think one of the questions also that came here from Africa, and I think I'd like to take that to you, Mary, because it's a question about the regulators, and you worked at the regulator for some time as well.
Yes.
A question that came from Taban Malis in South Sudan. What role could the regulator play in promoting the addressing of mental well-being?
Okay, that's a very interesting question. As a regulator, I know coming from both sides, when an operator does not want to hear a regulator is coming to to visit their offices. And I think as the regulator, they should be able to look at this issue of mental well-being, where in terms of if, let's say, a pilot, a cabin crew, an engineer, I'm talking about those ones because they are licensed.
Yes. Okay.
And everybody who is licensed is scared because if I lose my license, I lose my career.
Job. Yeah.
And where else am I going? Because aviation is so unique that if you're a pilot, you can't go be employed somewhere else because your career is to fly, and vice versa, even for an engineer. So I think as a regulator, they should be able to come with a way where to make it more conducive, to be able to allow, yes, you went through a mental breakdown, but it doesn't mean that they are punitive, that you will never go back to fly. You'd rather make the environment friendly where somebody can be able to report themselves early before the issue becomes detrimental to not only themselves, but to also other people. And it's solved, it's dealt with vis-a-vis much later when things are, out of control. Yes.
Yeah. I think it's also very interesting. Our senior program manager, Rene Dorne, also keeps stressing the importance of not speaking about mental health, but about mental well-being, because a regulatory change that Australia is particularly trying to push at the moment is, I think it also addresses the point of Aderonke, is to try and move away when it comes to medical examinations from healthy, non-healthy. It's a very binary system at the moment. You're either healthy or you're not healthy, whereas especially with mental health, I think that was the point Aderonke was trying to make, if I get you correctly. It's a scale, it's there temporarily. It can be, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't work, but maybe you have to reduce the number of shifts you're doing, for example.
Yes. This comes to the employers. You must have some certain program in place if you need to take a break from work, you should be able to take a break from work and come back healthier and having regain. But one of the key things people are afraid of is if I declare, I might be sent on and I might lose my space in the workplace. So apart from seeking for help, the employer has a duty, has a responsibility to assure by policy to say, if I have a mental breakdown and I need to go off work for 1, 2, 3 months, I should be able to come back. Even not for that particular position, I must be able to be accommodated in the workplace, because at the end of the day, if you lose your job, if you lose your license, then you don't have a living.
And vice versa, of course. If the employer has to train somebody else, it's also expensive for them. So it's much better to resume them back in
but at times, when things and systems are not in place, then the latitude for the employer to take a decision and says, because I can actually ask you to go and leave the establishment without any reason, as long as I pay you off and I do what is proper. So it is important that for an employer to be seen as being supportive of a mental well-being of their employees. You could have, it's just like having a short-term illness policy, long-term illness policy. You'll be
have something in your policy
in place
that enables,
which is shared by the human resources to everyone. So if I have that issue, I don't complicate the matter by thinking I'm afraid to declare I have an issue. So I'm in the office, I'm at work today, in the next 2 days I'm off work, and I keep telling I have personal issue to deal with and I'm not discussing. And like Mary said, it's degenerate into a very serious issue that people go into more serious complications.
Yeah, because they don't have that space and the policies. I think it's a very nice suggestion to put a policy in place that enables people to take off.
I think taking it further, I think there are trust issues to say when you sit at home and you say, I'm not well, your manager will then come to you and say, you better bring a doctor's report that you were actually sick. So I think it's upon the leaders and the powers that be to put it into policy, like she was saying, to say, you should allow somebody time to rest when they say they can't. Yeah. Because that's part of them looking after themselves, looking after their mental well-being.
And looking after the company as well, indeed. Time for book number 2. An international bestseller, apparently. Glucose Revolution by Jesse Inchauspé. Jesse Inchauspé. The only thing that's important for the viewers out there is the Juliet, the first letter of the first name. You were taking this book to the studio, I think?
Yeah.
Briefly, what does it mean to you? Why is it in the studio today?
Yeah, it was such an interesting read for me because it talks about the sugar spike, which brings with it a lot of problems. So in order to manage your glucose level or your sugar level within your blood, there is a reference to the order in which you eat your food impacts how much of the sugar spike you get, and also the time you eat your food, and also what you do after eating. So it was quite an interesting read.
So it's quite relevant to well-being, isn't it?
Yeah, to well-being.
The physical side of it. Yeah. Well, again, it will go on to our reading list. Thanks very much for that. Before we go on, a word of appreciation to our sponsors, because we cannot do our work without our sponsors, our friends and corporate friends. So in this case, thank you very much to aircraft manufacturer Airbus for making this episode possible. Back to our discussion about mental well-being. There's a couple of questions actually which I still have here from Africa. One thing which I thought was quite interesting, it's a question from Emmanuel Niegaba from Rwanda. His question is, should well-being checkups be applicable to all workers? So I think his suggestion was there's a medical checkup, whether you're medically fit, but should well-being be part of that as well? Mary, what do you think?
I think it's important for everybody in the aviation industry to have mental checkup. And I don't think it should be labeled in a way that when you're going to the doctor that we're all going for mental checkup. I think it should be incorporated with all the other things that we are going through, because I believe that it's just like safety. It affects everybody in every spectrum. So you can't say that the people in the cockpit or the people in management, the mental well-being is more important than the subordinate staff who are down there, because if the load controller is having mental issues and then they do the weight and balance
wrongly,
in a wrong way, It will affect everybody. Yes.
So it's an interesting suggestion, I think, from if that's a suggestion. Any reaction from Aderonke?
Yes, I agree. People need to do some mental check on themselves. But most importantly, it shouldn't be isolated. It should be part of a comprehensive check.
A regular, yeah.
Yes. And it's not everybody that can do, it's not every hospital that can do this. So there must be some certain, which comes in with the regulator.
Yeah.
Being able to certify some certain health facilities to be able to perform that role so that we are coming out with a real result and help. You seek for help when you need to, when some parameters are not in place. I've seen a pilot before, having gone through such, it was reported that is unstable in terms of even in communication. So for such a pilot, you can't roster such a pilot for flying duties because it's experiencing some issues in terms of even communicating with people is unstable. His fidgeting, his body languages are not what it used to be. It's only an expert that can say that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just feel it's the person is just gesticulating and it's because maybe it's behavioral. So these are things that we can put in place, but specific facilities should do those tests.
For aviation, yeah. Actually, that's what because unfortunately, currently in Africa, there's very few aviation psychologists. In fact, in many places, there's very few psychologists. So it's a program we're rolling out as Avy Assist. We're setting up a course on aviation psychology as well throughout the region, partially online so that we can reach more people. Excellent. So I think we can take our time for the third book. Which is John C. Maxwell, the 360-degree leader. So the word that's important for you viewers out there is the Juliet, another Juliet. Aderonke, I think you took this to the studio.
Yes, I love this book for few reasons, so many reasons, but I'll tell you a few.
Yes.
This book emphasizes the fact that you don't have to be appointed a leader before you can be a leader. Leadership can start from the middle level. And it's it's trying to debunk a lot of myths. One of them is that you can actually be a leader from even being a junior colleague. And at times you've seen people in a group of people, one person just stand out, arranges people, other people, despite not being a leader. That's what this book is talking about.
Okay.
That at every level, then the book is talking about the fact that to be a leader, you must be able to lead yourself and perform exceptionally well. Because really, from where resources are you pulling out from if you don't have those leadership qualities and traits in you? So leadership is not just about, what John Maxwell is saying is that it's not about being named a leader. You must act it out. You must be seen as a leader and you must live to expectation. Absolutely,
yeah. And I think also people sometimes think leaders and managers are the same, but that's not the case necessarily. Thanks very much. It'll go on our reading list. I go back to a question which we've got from Uganda, from Sabina Mwanga. His question is, does your organization know about mental health? Is it discussed in the boardroom? Mary, can I come to you? Because you're now with a smaller operator where sometimes the lines are short.
Operator, it's something that we discuss. Being a small operator, the advantage that we have is that we get to talk to everybody. And then there are days that I'd actually notice, you know, if you're a happy-go-lucky person and you're not, that day you come in and I'll notice it and I'll be able to talk to you. Have we discussed it in a boardroom in a formal setup? Not yet. But do we do it informally? Yes, we do.
Okay, I think that's a very honest answer. Thanks for that. Aderonke, Marvin?
Yes, it's. I think now it's more of informal setting. And like I explained earlier on, we've made few attempts over the years, but it's open. It's now for people to be bold enough to talk about it, but the system is there. But I think the informal setting works better because nobody wants something written about them. Nobody wants a document bearing my name as having a mental related issue. So people prefer to have an informal discussion. And of course, in the boardroom, you discuss it, but not something that is written. Because, like we said, the confidentiality and the fact that people don't want to be stigmatized as having those issues. But I'm sure as we progress, maybe it won't even be any big deal anymore as time goes on.
Yeah, I think it is a noble aspiration to have, to also, I mean, like you said, not at a detailed level of individual cases, but to make sure that also the board, the people that are shareholders, perhaps in your case, that they are aware of, you know, if we sometimes sign people off, because they, if we follow your suggestion, Aderonke, if we sometimes sign people off for a couple of months, that is for a good reason, and we as a company, we as board support that. Indeed. Time for another short break from Mental Wellbeing Support for All. And this is for the people who are new to Avy Assist. Here is a short video that explains to you what we are all about since 1995.
Africa, a continent on the rise. Africa is the world's second biggest air transport growth market, and there is a lot to do. Africa is in the process of giving the continental aviation industry a place on the world map, on all fronts. This requires unprecedented efforts, even more so in a post-COVID-19 recovery. It means eliminating a backlog, but also respecting sustainability and CO2 emissions. Building safety on the ground and in the air with technical and operational training. More than ever, international cooperation is vital to give what is arguably the most important economic link between Africa and the rest of the world, connecting people across the vast distances in Africa. An essential link, and that's why there is Avy Assist. Africa and Avy Assist. We have been leading, building and supporting safety promotion for the African aviation industry since 1995. Affordable, independent and professional. We stand up for aviation safety in Africa. We change attitudes and produce safety. Our professionals support African professionals, and we do it with passion by delivering on-site and online courses across Africa and more. Avy Assist. Join us in Kigali or anywhere else on the continent. The African aviation industry needs you right now, more than ever. Avy Assist.
That's us. Passion for aviation safety promotion in Africa since 1995, powered by volunteers. Let's get back to mental well-being support for all. And actually, I'd love to come to Marvin on this, because in your country of birth, Zimbabwe, there's a beautiful program going on, which is not currently being used for aviation, but it's called the Friendship Bench. I think you've read a bit about it, but do you think, well, briefly, maybe can you explain what it is about, and then do you think are there any lessons we can take from that in our industry?
So in Zimbabwe, just like any other, probably other African countries, they have a shortage of specialists. In this case, the psychiatrists, the specialized doctors that deal with mental well-being. So when I did my mini research, there are only 4 in the whole country of more than 18 million people. So what one of the doctors came up with was the friendship bench concept, where they went around a community and looked for grandmothers who are informal authority figures within the community. So with that, they trained them in basic counseling. So the idea is friendship bench, literally with a person that has a problem, you sit on the bench, they tell you the problems. You don't have to do anything, just talk about the problem. So if there's any issues that are beyond the grandmother, then they would refer to the psychiatrist. In this case, one of the 4 in the country. So the concept is such that you have local support next to you. You don't have to pay anything. It's somebody whom you know, somebody whom you respect, somebody who you would normally go if you have any problems, but then just now trained, and they have a channel and a direct link to the professional. For this first layer of, and I think what I found interesting when I read about this, first of all, they work in the local language, which I think in many African settings is very important, because if you speak about ground crew, dispatchers sometimes, well, dispatchers is different, I think, but if you speak about ground crew, load controllers, they may not always be so conversant in English. So I think the concept of taking, I think they use 14 questions in Shona in that case. So then they call it kufungisisa. This is a Shona word that means to think too much about something.
Okay.
So don't do that. Just talk about it.
Just talk at the bench. and I think now the interesting question is, could you see something like that work in our industry, where we work towards informal people, briefly trained mentors who can help out in such a setting? Would that work, you think?
Indeed.
Yeah.
That's the same principle they've used in the company I'm working currently in, and also in one of the companies back in Africa. It's currently in operation now. The concept is there's an external source or an external authority or external expert, and then you train people in a team. One person is trained. You go to the person,
Provide the support.
and if it's beyond them, then they refer you to the expert.
Yeah, and the expert, let's clear, is not always a psychiatrist, because if you speak psychiatry, you think of something that is really wrong, often like a mental health issue, whereas a lot of these things can also be dealt with by psychologists, who are still also scarce in Africa, but hopefully we'll work with them on also increasing the aviation knowledge, because like Aderonke said, I think, if we have psychologists and people that support us in aviation who know nothing of aviation, it's quite difficult to have that peer support because you're not a peer. Aderonke, could you see something like this work in Nigeria, you think, a friendship bench?
Very well, it can work. It's how you promote it. And then what people get to know is that at the end of the day, it's worth it to go through that line of help, to seek for such help. Communication is very important. It's how you communicate. And if I take this glass now and I tell you, if you use it, this will happen, you'll be healthy, you'll be much better or something, you will try to use it. So it's about how you package it and how you promote it to the people. Getting to an elderly person and just talk, it doesn't cost anybody anything.
No.
It's just, So, and if I talk, like she said, it takes a lot of burden off you. People just want to have somebody to talk to, and they talk with you to say, this is what I'm going through. And what they just need is to say, oh, you're going through this, it will soon be over. I think it's more comforting and more reassuring to see that people can go through that. Just talk. And that's the solution.
And offload, And I think the interesting thing, Mary, is for you, I think the concept of the friendship bench has also arrived in Kenya.
Yes.
So maybe that's something you can look into as Pinulair, to find a friendship bench somewhere. Would that work? and how big would you think is the importance of the local language in this? When we speak about, because when you speak about air traffic controllers, pilots, cabin crew, their English is usually very good, obviously. But once you go a bit further into the organization, that may be more of a challenge. Would it help to have that in a local language, you think?
I think it will help to have it in a local language, because I know, like, sometimes the challenge they talk about in Africa, they say that we are tribal. But when you look at it in the positive side, when someone says they're tribal, it's not necessarily it's negative. It's you feel that I can be able to communicate with this person and we can be able to understand each other because our culture is the same. So now if someone is to be able to communicate about the mental well-being, because number one, it's not a very, it's sensitive, so it's not a comfortable thing to talk about. But if you can communicate in your local language, it's even easier.
It helps to put you at ease in that conversation. Excellent. Well, we've come to the final question to all of you, the elevator pitch. You find yourself in this elevator up to the 15th floor or whatever with the chief financial officer, and you have $10,000 available to try and address mental well-being of all your staff, so not just the cabin crew and the cockpit crew. What would you tell the chief financial officer where you would like to spend this $10,000? Mary?
Okay, I would actually tell him first to make everybody aware, to break it down, get a professional to break it down what mental health is. Because people who, as we said earlier on, think mental well-being is a mental breakdown. They're two different things.
And it's madness.
Madness, yes. So just for them to be explained for. Then after that, once everybody is aware what mental well-being is, I would ask that with the money that I've been given, people to volunteer, to become mental champions. So then that way, it's something that we own it, vis-a-vis the management saying, okay, you'll be the mental champion and things like that. Because when people volunteer, it's something that they're passionate about.
Absolutely.
And then once they're taught, then my bench will not be a physical bench, but it will be the mental, the champions can either go out there, but even the company itself knows, hey, by the way, Tom is a champion, so I can be able to talk with Tom in, maybe over lunch, call him or her, and that way we can be able to improve the mental well-being in my company.
Okay, $10,000 well spent by the sound of it. Aderonke, what would you spend the $10,000 on when it comes to mental well-being?
Okay, bearing in mind that it's not a well-known subject, I will look forward to having a research center where people can be trained, more awareness can be raised, and then people are much better in terms of mental well-being. As people look forward to be economically, okay, and then financially well-being, it's okay. So the mental well-being too needs to be, more attention needs to be paid to that. And mental well-being is linked to safety, because if you are not mentally
in a good place,
stable, you cannot operate a safe in operation. So I will link that to safety and promote it and link it together, safety and mental well-being, and having like a mental well-being first aiders everywhere, every station, so that you don't have an excuse
not to
find yourself not to be able to access such facility.
Excellent. Well, another research centre, Avy Assist is working on 3 safety promotion centres across Africa, which would all focus on learn, research and experience. So let's make sure we get one of those centres down in Lagos.
Interesting.
Marvin, your elevator pitch, where were you going to use the $10,000 for?
I'd say start small. Just identify an informal leader, train them. They will spread the message. If then you just have a reference, probably in HR, or if need be, if resources are available, then get external help. So start where you are, identify an informal leader, train them, and then the process starts. And
start small. I like that, because I think something we also sometimes see in Africa is people then think, we have to employ a psychologist, which, especially if you're a smaller operator, that's not going to be possible. And even if you're a bigger operator, that's a challenge. So pooling resources to perhaps every once in a while bring in a psychologist from a university or from a private practice. Excellent. Well, dear panel members, I think we're approaching the end of what we have time for today. Thank you very much for joining me here in the focus sessions, for travelling all the way from your respective duty stations, some of them far afield, some of them closer to home. A big thank you also to the team behind the scenes here in the studio in the Netherlands. Thank you, Monica, Eric and Dan, for your hard work and for helping us make the focus sessions possible and putting up such very high standards. You're part of the family too. Then to your dear viewers out there from Maputo to Kigali to Dar es Salaam and Windhoek, thank you for tuning in to Safety Promotion. If you enjoyed today's focus session, please be our ambassador and tell your friends about the work of Avy Assist. We would love for you to post a picture with your certificate from this session on LinkedIn. If you want us to continue these focus sessions, please consider becoming a friend of Avy Assist. You can do that in our web shop, www.avyassist.org/shop, or come and visit us at our first Avy Assist Safety Promotion Centre, the Avy Assist Safety Promotion Centre in Rwanda. Still a few courses coming up before the end of the year in November at our centre in Kigali, and also a number of courses at our partner Kenya Airways in Nairobi. And please don't forget, only you can target safety. We look forward to continuing our mission with you to improve African aviation safety. Join us for the next focus session early next year in season 5 of the focus sessions. Same time, same frequency. For now, we say murabeho to our Kinyarwanda's viewers and see you next time to the rest of you. Goodbye.